All right, we are now going to talk about different ways that you can treat your drawing after you've finished it. So this is my drawing as far as I've gotten so far. So now I have a couple decisions to make, and I wanted to talk to you about your options. So option one is going to be doing something like this. And this you'll see is really talking about line weight. That's when you're pressing heavier on certain objects that are more important. And then getting a little lighter in certain areas, even letting the line disappear. You can also use very thin line where you're pressing very lightly for areas that are not going to be quite as important as maybe the actual shapes themselves or maybe the division of the lips. So this is option one, sticking with pencil and just varying your line weight. I will demo that right here. Option two would be, you guys can see a theme, I love my skeletons. Option two would be to use your Sharpies, your fine point and your ultra fine point Sharpie, and really going and using the fine point, the thicker one, in areas that you think are more important. Same place where you would have used your line weight and you would have pressed heavier. And then using the thinner Sharpie in areas that really just kind of accentuate the details, like the reflections or the veins in the leaves, or maybe the cracks in the skeleton, things like that. Option three, this one's going to be the most challenging. And option three is going to be called line stylization with a Sharpie. That's where you're using the tapering method, where when you see intersection, here's another example, where you see the intersection between two lines, you kind of create this thicker curve and you go over your object a little, or I'm sorry, your line a little bit thicker and curve it. So then it gives it this kind of stylized look. This is kind of a close-up. This is more what a drawing would look like from if it's zoomed out a little bit. Also notice that I'm still using thick and thin Sharpie in places. So like if there's reflection, so this is an old tricycle that I have back at school. So I would use my ultra fine point Sharpie for these little things, right? Where I'm gonna see little value shifts, or I'm gonna outline the shadows or the highlights. Okay, so let's practice this here. So let's say the first option would be to use line weight. So this is my full drawing. These are some of the reflections from the glass and the bottle and also on the apple. So I know that the skeleton's outer shape is going to be really important. So I'm pressing really, really hard. And you notice I'm holding my pencil very close because the closer you hold it, the more control you have of the pencil, but also the darker your line's gonna be because you're pressing harder. So you can probably see that there's already a bit of a distinctive difference. I'm pressing hard, 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 hard. There we go. Okay, then I have some options to make. I know I'm gonna continue here. You kind of get the idea. Now, do I want to make these quite as dark? Maybe not, but definitely the eyes, because the eye sockets, I should say, eyes are missing, because those in my actual picture end up looking almost black. So, you know, I would do the same thing with my apple, and you guys kind of get the idea. Probably not press this hard in all these other areas, maybe leave it alone as it is. You might want to actually just do the outlines first, look back and see if you like the way it looks. This little stem from the pencil or from the apple definitely needs a little bit more attention. And then these, I'm going to press a little light, probably leave that light. That was a little highlight. Okay, so again, this is option one. So if this is the option you want to use, great. Also make sure your line quality is good so you don't get that sketchy line. Option two would be to do pretty much the same thing. I'll just demo it here. But now I'm going to use my fine point Sharpie for that area that I think is really, really important. And then I would probably, you know, I'll do this, I'll do the bottle. And you definitely don't want to do Sharpie if your hand is not very steady, because you cannot correct mistakes with Sharpie. And you guys have already used Sharpie in your last summative assessment, so you know how that goes. Now look, this is part of the bottle here, but because we're looking at it through glass, it was shifted a little bit. So maybe I'll use the thinner Sharpie. And these are some of the reflections that I saw in the glass, or shadows, that had some distinct shapes. So I'm going to use my ultra fine point Sharpie with that. I would also use those in here and other places. So this would be option 2. In option 3, you would just basically build on what you just did. With option 3, you might actually just want to use the ultra fine point Sharpie and then thicken things up, but you can use this as well. So, all right, we got this going on. And let's move on to option 3, should we? Let's do it. So option 3 would be like if you have an intersection between 2 points, like right here, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use that ultra fine point Sharpie and just kind of round the edges. So now if you just do one, it looks kind of weird, but you keep going. And you would definitely want to practice this first, because this does definitely require a steady hand. And if you start doing this pretty much everywhere, it becomes very natural. And then it looks more cohesive. So anywhere where you have intersections between lines, even within the object itself, you just kind of create these little curves. And then if you do that all the way around, it can look pretty cool. So let me just demo that. Oops, see, I made a mistake, and that's okay, because if you make a mistake, you just thicken that line right up. Okay. So let me just demo this a little bit separately. So basically what I'm talking about is if you have 2 lines that are intersecting like this, all you're gonna do is you're gonna go in and you're gonna thicken that line up just right here. So it kind of looks tapered. Remember what tapered meant? I'll probably want to use my thinner Sharpie to do that. It's actually easier to do your thinner Sharpie. And so tapering means that it starts a little thick and then it gets thinner. So anywhere, so let's say we had another intersection here, you would do the same thing. You would just kind of, whoops, you would just create this kind of a thicker curve, essentially. That's really all it is. It's just like a thicker curve. And it makes your object, I have to fix this line because this line, I totally butchered this guy. So I said, steady hand. I've had too much coffee. And then you would do the same thing here. And the problem, or I guess the challenge with this would be that when you're doing this, you really have to pay attention to all the places where you're going to have lines intersecting or touching, because anywhere you have them, you kind of have to do this. Okay, so let's review. Option 1, pencil and line weight. Option 2, Sharpie, thick and thin Sharpie. Line 3 would be using these tapered line stylization techniques everywhere you have 2 lines touching. Okay, so those are your 3 options, and I wish you guys all the luck. Feel free to discuss these options with me. Because I moved on to option 3, I'm just going to finish this whole drawing in option 3. So when you see me in class, this guy's going to be done and using the tapered line method. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.